we bought a small business, and we're functionally the shepherds or pastors of this group of people, most of which don't find themselves in church. And we think that that's an incredible opportunity to glorify the Lord in excellence in what we do, provide a service to the Front Range, and then care for our employees and their families while we do it.
You're listening to the Faith and Work Podcast, where we explore ways to serve God and others in our daily work to bring life and hope to workplaces and cities.
Welcome to the Faith and Work Podcast. I'm Ross Chapman. I'm your host today, and I have the joy of serving as the CEO at Denver Institute for Faith and Work, who hosts this podcast. And we are continuing a series this year called Voices from the Workplace. It's a chance for us to highlight people who are just great examples of what it looks like to practically live out their faith in their industry or particular workplace. And the goal of this whole series is just to hear from ordinary workers who are just being faithful in the everyday decisions and responsibilities that they have in their job. It's been a really fun series. And today I have the honor of hosting this episode alongside our VP of Formation, Brian Gray. Brian, thanks for being here today.
Ross the boss, it is good to be with you.
It is really always a joy to do episodes with Brian Gray. Brian actually leads two really cool things that are launching later this fall that you should be aware of. The first one is the 5280 Fellows, which you can hear more about at the end of this episode. And the second is the Denver Redemptive Lab for entrepreneurs. And that is very appropriate because today we're going to be hearing from a couple different voices who are entrepreneurs through acquisition. But what does that even mean, Brian? What is an entrepreneur through acquisition?
Yeah, there's a lot of activity, particularly in the Colorado Front Range area around entrepreneurship, very popular in our economy. And yet the idea of entrepreneurship through acquisition, or we'll call it ETA, is a growing path to business ownership. Instead of starting from scratch, entrepreneurs buy and then re-operationalize existing businesses from other owners. It's very common just with the huge generational shift of baby boomer-owned businesses as people are retiring and exiting out. And so people have found this to be a really high impact way to bring their faith and influence and then marketplace excellence into the operation and organization of a company. So we're going to hear from a couple folks, both of whom are ETA leaders. The first one is Matt Barnes, and he is the owner and operator of Professional Touch Laundry Services and was a part of our inaugural Redemptive Business Lab, a partnership we have through Praxis. He joined us last April for that, so we'll first hear from Matt. And then we're going to talk a little bit with Bob Larkin, who's a former board member here and an entrepreneur through acquisition in the Denver Front Range.
That's right. And the conversation with Matt is really awesome because he's very much focused on just how do we live this out day to day in our business decisions and how we treat our employees and our customers. And then the interview with Bob is actually done by our founder, Jeff Haanen, was recorded at Business for the Common Good 2025. And it was an awesome conversation where Bob is really describing why he decided to do this and what his ultimate kind of business purpose is. And I won't tell you more about it right now because it's a great vision for what he wants to do as an ETA. So thanks for listening in. Great conversations ahead. Matt Barnes, welcome to the Faith and Work Podcast.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, Matt, tell us a little bit about how you came to do the work you're doing today. I know we can actually point to some other places where people can get the full journey, but give us a quick overview. And then how did you come to see what you're doing now, or maybe even entered with this mentality? Like, how was that like your daily ministry, the primary way that you're working with God for the good of others, the common good? How did those all come together for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Texas. I worked in oil and gas and consulting and private equity, and over time just realized that I could go buy my own small business, and that was a thing other people were doing, and decided in 2020 that that was the right decision. Wasn't on the same page with my wife when that first came about, but then in 2022 went and searched all around Denver, all over the Front Range for a small business to buy, and we closed on it and purchased it in 2023. And learned in the middle of that this is called entrepreneurship through acquisition, and it's common. And yeah, when we thought about buying a small business, a lot of our impetus from the beginning was, buying into a world where we could live out our faith very practically with no real governance or accountability. I think working for people in corporations before that, there was always some form of glass ceiling or stop to me being able to share my faith and practice faith at work. And buying a small business felt like a good unlock to be able to do that with a small group of people in an ungoverned way. And that was really refreshing for us.
That's great. So just give us like one example of what you're doing now that maybe you couldn't have done in previous roles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing we practice at Professional Touch quite a bit is prayer is a big part of our first response, not our last resort. I can think of a story just from this last week. One of our key employees whose father is living with her had just passed away at her home. And from a secular standpoint, like I'm looking at her vacation days left and her sick days left and understanding where Colorado Family could help her out, but was able to be really generous with her time off and make sure she continued to be paid. But we also pulled in our managers and we prayed there and then, 3:00 on a Thursday for Nora's family. And that was something that my managers were used to being our response when crisis hits. So we strategized how we can get her time off and paid and money and food over to her family. But we also just asked God that he would bring comfort and peace to her family.
Yeah, super cool. That's awesome.
Matt, as you talked about this idea of entrepreneurship through acquisition and buying a small business, that has certain risk, a certain reward to it, and it's a different path than staying in a large company that could remunerate you and has a certain type of risk, or entrepreneurship and starting a business from scratch. I'm just curious for you, your why. What was the appeal for ETA as opposed to those other two paths particularly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was a mid-career professional when we decided to do this. And while I had grown in business skill sets and network and confidence in my work, entrepreneurship through acquisition felt like an awesome way to jump into a already thriving organization and just add my expertise in a faith layer to kind of get in the game quicker. You mentioned risk. It certainly is not without risk, but we see in Matthew 25 and Luke 19, I would argue all throughout the Bible, that God asks us to risk things. And, sometimes that's the boldness to have a hard conversation. And sometimes that's rolling your net worth into buying a small business that you really pray continues to thrive and make money and support people. And so I was at that juncture in 2022 where it felt like God was asking me to take the next big risk. And in this sense, it was entrepreneurship and, putting a lot of money down to go risk and buy a business to continue to run it.
Okay, I have a question for you. You're doing laundry services. May not be the most glamorous thing, but super important. Like everybody wants clean linens where they go. And you guys are part of that. So it's also kind of like a role that could be overlooked in society. And so I'm curious like how your faith has, how scripture informed you or your perspective on people, like really formed the way that you're looking at your employees, who society probably overlooks pretty regularly.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a large bit of our staff is entry-level workers, and laundry services is not that sexy. But, in the entrepreneurship through acquisition world, the more boring the business, usually the more sexy and stable and predictable as far as an investment thesis. But it's also just a base service that you can take anything and do it with excellence unto the Lord, and that is glorifying to God. And in this realm, provides for families. So a lot of our workers are entry-level, unskilled. They almost all come to me from unsafe, entry-level, minimum wage type jobs, and we give them a safe, clean, happy, healthy environment to work in. And we pay above minimum wage, which is really uncommon for commercial laundry. Most of my competitors have more illegal labor than legal labor, and they pay under the table. And what comes along with that is shady business practice that's not great for the employee. So setting a higher bar at an entry-level role, I think, is a special opportunity to say, hey, we're going to value you. You are safe here. There was opportunity for upward progression. One, that's great for business retention, but two, that's the baseline to then care for their souls. I mean, a lot of what we did is we bought a small business and we're functionally the shepherds or pastors of this group of people, most of which don't find themselves in church. And we think that that's an incredible opportunity to glorify the Lord in excellence in what we do, provide a service to the Front Range, and then care for our employees and their families while we do it.
That's awesome. Just a quick follow-up then. Like, is that a vision that you carried into the business when you decided, yeah, we want to buy a company, this is what it's going to look like, this is the vision we have for it? And then, like, how did you come to see the injustices of the workplace or the industry that you were in? You know, did you anticipate those when you came in, or was it because you were there you started to see them?
Yeah, I think we came into the business with a spine and an idea and a vision that we could do this. But as we've run the business and we've gotten to know the employees and their stories, as we've understood our customers better, a lot of this gets fleshed out on the journey. So I would say 2.5 years in, we have a lot better idea of where we can change our practice to change outcome than what we did coming into it. I mean, the joke is I didn't do the laundry at my own house before I bought a commercial laundry plant, and now I'm responsible for tens of thousands of pounds every week. And so I'm still learning the laundry bit as we go, but it's been made clear that functionally we're in a human business. We have human customers, we have human employees, and so situationally we've learned where we can apply faith appropriately and where it's just better to put our heads down and do a really good job and just do good work.
So, Matt, you given us a couple of examples of ways of practices that have come from your faith motivation, either praying for an employee or the way that you've chosen to pay people and create a kind of a care environment for your employees. My guess is that a lot of people listening feel this tension between their faith being personal, private, very important to them, and then working in public spaces where that is not their explicit job. And so I'm wondering if you could just talk about other ways that your faith is obviously very deeply motivating, how you bring that to bear upon ways that organizational culture happens, or the way clients might experience the difference in you, or the way that employees might feel about their work because of your personal faith motivations.
Absolutely. I think the big daily basis countenance that I bring to our company is a big part of my personal faith being fleshed out. I mean, coming to work joyful and stable and confident inspires those same character traits in my employees. And then, you know, when there's crisis with customer or a vendor or a compliance issue, that base level peace and confidence, I think, starts within me, moves to my staff, then can move out to our customers really well.
Well, just continuing on that theme, you know, what are some of the habits or rhythms that you personally practice that help you stay grounded in your faith as you're leading this company? Like, what does that look like? How are you staying rooted in your faith?
Yeah, absolutely. I think simple ones are knowing, you know, at a laundry plant, we're clocking in, clocking out, mainly hourly employees. And so knowing when to put work down is really easy in our plant in a way that a corporate job, the email is always on your phone and always running. We have pretty hard start and stop times for our employees. I would say I do a more intensive goal setting. I call it a go forward plan, yearly and then quarterly, that kind of resets personal goals and business goals. And my managers are aware of those, and they kind of know what my targets are kind of the next 3 months or so. And that sets a lot of the direction of the business for the next 3 months. And then we have quite a bit of seasonality in our business. A lot of Denver businesses have the same thing tied to the weather patterns here and the tourism and travel patterns. And so we can, you know, understand those year over year and then plan how we work differently in the summer versus the dead of winter. You know, are we blowing and going, running every single truck, every single route in the heat of August right now? Or are we in February where we're doing primarily preventative maintenance to get ready for the next busy season? A lot of those are personal goals and rubrics that I set for myself that then bleed out into the company.
That's very cool. I'm curious, Matt, if you'd be willing to tell us, we know you've done you've helped your employees get along in some unique situations. Would you be willing to talk about kind of how that came to, like, just something you had to deal with in the business, but was also related to something that was going on in Denver at the time, and how that just became something you had to deal with, and then how did you address it?
So last year in 2024, Denver saw a lot of migrants from Central and South America come up to Denver, and they landed here without a job, and they didn't know anyone. And the government was supporting them, but they were having a really hard time finding stable work. And so we were able to assume quite a few of those employees. I mean, with, you know, legally work permits, making sure all those ducks were in a row, we were able to take on a lot of those employees last year. But I learned quickly that there is some level of consternation and racism between different South American countries. And we learned that real time in our laundry plant. And so a lot of last summer was spent in the HR category, making sure folks got along, were able to respect and work with each other. And I would say it was really successful. I mean, it took a lot of focus away from growing the business to make sure operational and people parts of the business were in place so that we all got along and worked together. And that was a handful of spicy conversations. And, we were able to retain quite a few of those employees even to this year. And I think our employees saw the way that we did peacemaking in the workplace, and that allowed them to continue to work next to each other. But I think it broke down a layer deeper and helped them understand this is just a person in need that wants to be here, honestly, working hard to provide for the family, just like you were when you first started this job or when you were first in this country. And I've learned a lot personally on what really matters to make different people groups kind of get along and be able to coexist and work hard together.
Matt, I've got one final question, real quick as a pause. We might connect this to the habits as a possibility. Matt, related to some of those habits or rhythms, I've come to know you as a business leader who's really relationally networked well. I'm curious the way that you have, through community and through relationships, both learned how you've advanced the work of other people and how the relationships with other leaders around you have supported what you're doing.
I'm not sure if it's God's providence in me trying to do something entrepreneurial, putting people around me that are like this, or if I've just naturally been drawn to these folks. But most of my best friends are other business owners or other leaders of large organizations. I would say Denver Institute, the Praxis Labs cohort we did last summer has been helpful to give me a few other guys to run in my lane with. But frankly, my best friends at church, they run restaurants in this town and catering businesses, and they have real estate groups, and they're leaders of large organizations that are naturally just my best friends, but have also been such a source of encouragement and inspiration on how we handle and shepherd this little business that we have. And honestly, that looks like practically phone calls throughout the week with all of these guys. Hey, what's going on in your organization? How did you overcome that challenge? And then how can I apply that to my organization? It's fun, running a small business in a little bit bigger town. You feel like there's a smaller cohort of people that are rubbing shoulders with you and facing a lot of the same challenges. And if, a migrant crisis hits the city, that hits my best friend's catering business very similarly to how it hits my laundry plant, even though these are radically different industries. And so that's been a real gift to me from God, that I would have other men that are striving to run and grow small businesses in this town.
That's awesome. Well, hey, just as we close up, Matt, love for you to just have the last word of just encouraging our listeners as they're thinking about, what risks could I be taking? What encouragement might you have for them as they seek to just more fully lean into, the things around me every day as opportunities to show God's love to the people around me?
Yeah, I would say for anyone working in an organization or thinking about taking a leap into entrepreneurship, fundamentally what you're doing is you're risking on behalf of what God has called you to do. I think about David. There's a great TV series out right now, The Tribe of David, and I watched that and was so inspired that it doesn't matter what the obstacle is. It doesn't matter what desk you're sitting at vocationally. God is asking us to risk more and more. It's all throughout Scripture. Entrepreneurship through acquisition is one form of that risk, but it could be you work at a big bank and you have a boss and you have people that report to you, and the risk is just to have a tough conversation that God and the Holy Spirit has put on your heart to go have. Or maybe it is a big risk and you're supposed to leave a job and go try something crazy because you believe the Lord is going before and asking you to do that. But I think if I have one message for anyone listening to this, it's look for where God is asking you to risk and then go follow that. I think the Lord goes before us and he comes behind us. That's probably the yes you need to say.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for being on the Faith and Work podcast and sharing with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Great to spend time with you guys.
Hi, I'm Ross Chapman, CEO at Denver Institute for Faith and Work. We want to see a future where every person's work brings hope and life to their city. which is a contrast with society's views of work. And for now, it's often a contrast with the views of work we hear at church. That's why I'm excited to share with you that we are currently in the midst of our FOR campaign. That's the FOR campaign, meaning this is a vision for the future of work, workers, church, and cities. Like you, we've noticed a lack of accessible, biblically grounded, and excellent vocational discipleship opportunities. This gap is causing many to have an anemic or a lifeless vision of their work. Vocational discipleship can come from many places in your life, such as this podcast. And as we seek to expand those opportunities with high-quality content over the next 5 years, our aim is to help 100,000 people recognize and affirm their daily work is central to joining God in his vision and work to make all things new. If you've been encouraged and discipled by thoughtful conversations that you hear on the Faith and Work podcast, or if your life has been shaped by Denver Institute in some way, I encourage you to help advance this mission through the way you work and by giving. Will you consider a one-time, quarterly, or monthly gift to support this work? If so, visit the Give page at denverinstitute.org to get started.
Well, it's great to be here again back home. I am here with a good friend, Bob Larkin, today. And we're just going to have a conversation about wisdom in business. And before this session, I did a little bit of research on a topic. It seems like today everybody is talking about acquiring a business. And here is an unfortunate stat. 90% of people that set out to acquire a business never actually acquire a business. They never actually get the work done. Today we're going to talk to the 10%. Bob did get the work done. So Bob Larkin is a dear friend. He is the board chair at Denver Institute for Faith and Work. He is the father of 4, one of whom is here today, right there. There's Sophie. The husband of one, Rennie, is here as well. And he is now the president and owner of Treatment Technology, a small business in Northern Colorado that we're going to have a chance to hear a little bit more about today. And Bob is, I would say Bob is a mystery in many ways to me. Bob, he is a Coloradan, but not really. He grew up in Malaysia. He doesn't quite think like most Coloradans do as well. He is a banker by trade, but he's also now a very risk-tolerant entrepreneur. So how does like banker and risk-tolerant entrepreneur go together? Bob Larkin can do it. And Bob has got a knack for building business, but his why behind why he builds businesses is very uncommon. So Bob, thanks for just being here today to share your story.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with a lot of good friends, a lot of people that have had a lot of impact on me. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go back in time. Before we get to business a little bit, why don't you share a little bit about where you grew up and how it influenced you?
Yeah, everybody's story starts at birth, and so that's where I'm going to start. When I was born, my parents were training to become traditional missionaries in Southeast Asia. They were specifically looking to go into closed communist China in the very early 80s, and you can see some pictures of us there. But they were working in Hong Kong. My mom is from Hong Kong. She's Cantonese, and my dad's from Wisconsin. And when they were in Hong Kong, they realized that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of missionaries planning to go into closed China when it opened up. And at the time, the Lord impressed upon them to make a shift, to go somewhere potentially a little bit less reached and a little more closed. And so we moved to Singapore and then Indonesia to work with Islamic people groups in those countries. While we were in Indonesia, my parents were successful in planting a church and sharing the gospel, but the local government found out about what we were doing, and we were given 48 hours to leave. I was about 9 at that time. So they moved back to Singapore and regrouped to consider, well, what could we have done differently to be stable and stay in Indonesia and not be removed from a place that we were having success in sharing the gospel. And the Lord impressed upon them that, well, if we were creating business and jobs and impacting the local economy, it's probably pretty unlikely that we would have been removed from Indonesia. And so we moved north from there to Malaysia, and my parents started some businesses so that they could work in and among the people that they wanted to impact. This was transformational for my life. I saw our family removed from a country, from our friends, community, and shifting towards a focus on forming businesses, creating jobs, impacting the local economy. My parents, their impact on my life was huge during those years. We often had families live with us, other tent makers that would train and teach and coach in Bible studies. So my parents moved from a traditional view of missionary work to a tent making work. Tent making is a term that's used in Christian circles, kind of formed from Paul. Paul was a tent maker by trade, and the term tent maker means doing business in a place that to earn a living and share the gospel in a closed place, right? Paul traveled around the Roman Empire. He made tents to support his living and was able to share the gospel throughout the Roman Empire. And so my parents were tent makers during their career.
Amen. All right, so let's take us a little bit forward. Tell us about your early career in banking, maybe post-college, and what it was like and some of the lessons that God impressed upon you earlier in your career.
Yeah, so I went to Florida State University. I studied finance, and my hope was actually to be an entrepreneur coming out of college. I didn't have any capital. I didn't have any ideas, and I figured the best way to learn to be an entrepreneur was to get a great job, and I determined that banking was a great place for me to do that.
Yeah, they got the capital.
Yeah, they've got capital, and absolutely. I was fortunate. I was a credit analyst and an underwriter early in my career. I got to learn from a lot of great business leaders, entrepreneurs, got to ask them questions and understand how their business operated. It was a great learning experience. During that period, I had some great banking mentors that were really generous with their time. They gave me an offer that if I did my work well, they would bring me on every client call, every entertainment opportunity, and get out to networking events, and I took them up on that opportunity. I often worked late nights just so that I could attend the in-person opportunities, and I gleaned a lot of wisdom from them during that period.
What were some of the tensions early in your career that you experienced, particularly as a Christian?
Yeah, in banking, the idols there are revolving around wealth and prestige. They're working for the weekend, working for the next bigger house, the larger vacation, sending their kids to private school and college. And it was very self-focused and self-serving. I don't think that most of my banking colleagues looked at what they did as providing capital to communities, to businesses, helping human flourishing. And that's what banking does. It creates lubricity for capital to move to places that it needs to.
Okay, so about 3 years ago, you sensed a little bit of a shift in your career from a banking world to acquiring a business. So tell us a little bit about the why, and then how did you actually go about finding a business to buy?
Yeah, the why is a little bit of a long story. The period was kind of 2020 to 2022. We were all in COVID. The Lord was teaching me a number of different things, family life, church life, what I was doing at the bank, the work. They were all going really well. But I was noticing in culture and in some of the places that our family was involved, culture was shifting. There was sinful behaviors and things that didn't align with my values in the workplace and those communities. And the Lord impressed upon my wife and I to make a stand and speak up for those who were vulnerable during that time. And it was a challenging period. We had to wrestle with some difficult issues and stand up for things that we believed in. Often at night, I would ask the Lord, it's like, why do you have me in this position? This is not where I want to be. But coming out of that, I realized that I was growing. When you're stretched and challenged, that's when you lean on the Lord, and he provides his wisdom and guidance through those periods, and that's instrumental. So as we were coming out of some of those difficult conversations in places that we had agency and were advocating for what was right and true and good, the Lord challenged me from a work perspective. I felt that at the bank, I had reached a place where I was kind of plateauing and leveling out. I wasn't stretched and challenged or growing in the workplace. I could see the next positions at the bank within reach. They were more lucrative, more prestigious. But at a big bank that I was working at, I spent my career at JP Morgan and Bank of America. It was a long way to get to a place where I could impact culture, I could impact strategy. Even the positions above me were taking orders from New York and or Charlotte. And so for me, I wanted to be in a place where I was stretched and growing. That challenging period just before gave me that viewpoint that I want to be leaning in and learning and growing from the Lord.
Okay, so a friend suggested you potentially purchase a business. What was the actual search process like for you? I'm sure you looked at hundreds of deals and it took 18 months to 24 months. Like, what did it look like for you?
Yeah, so it looked like a period of surrender. When I decided that banking was a plateau for me and I needed to do something for my personal and spiritual growth, I thought I was going to actually shift and try to join a leadership team in another industry, right? I had this desire to be an entrepreneur coming out of college, but during a 16-year career of banking, I'd kind of given that up. I said, hey, the Lord has me here. I'm doing well. I'm thriving. I'm a light in a dark place at a big bank, but the entrepreneur path isn't for you. That's where God has you at a big bank. And I had settled for that was what he wanted me to do. And there was a period of surrender for moving on from the bank. I was looking at positions that I was going to make half as much as I did. It was going to be less prestigious, and I had to make a shift. And so there was a period of surrender there first to what the Lord's will was. And almost the moment I surrendered my path and my future to the Lord, he said, well, why don't you go buy a business? And the advice you get is network with a lot of boomers, try to find somebody who's transitioning their business. You should get online. There's a lot of bad businesses there, but it's good practice. So this was January of 2022. I got online. There were 2 interesting businesses. I signed one NDA, and 4 months later, we bought that business. I literally looked at one business, and we closed on that business. During that period, I had a lot of friends that said, Bob, you're naive, you're being stupid, irrational. Nobody looks at the first and only business and buys that. I'm very glad that I had some other friends that said, Bob, God has prepared you. You've spent 16 years looking at business profiles. You've got the skills and understanding to know what a good business is. Just because it's the first thing that you've looked at doesn't mean it's the wrong business. The Lord has prepared you for this time. And I could look back and say, wow, that's amazing. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I surrendered that to the Lord. And then he gave me the desires of my heart.
Yeah, amen. Okay, so you bought a business called Treatment Technology, which is a chemical distribution company in the water and wastewater industry here in Colorado. So tell us a little bit more about Treatment Technology, what it does, and working from a banking world to now in small blue collar business. Tell us about that difference as well.
Yeah, Treatment Technology, we provide water and wastewater treatment chemicals throughout Colorado. It helps with chlorination, with pH control, with helping grab the particles and remove them through filtration. We provide to mid to small size municipalities throughout Colorado and to a lot of commercial pools in the summertime and some oil and gas. Our focus is clean water for life, and we provide great customer service and reliability. It's surprising how often our communities are on the brink of not having the chemicals that they need to service your water, and our reliability is crucial to that.
So did you even know that chemicals were needed to get clean drinking water? Did anybody know that ahead of time? Does anybody know that? They have to do stuff to your water so that it's like healthy to drink, hence Treatment Technology. Okay, the focus of this panel is really on wisdom and wisdom in business. And in business, you're constantly making decisions. What does it mean for you to seek God's wisdom as you're making all these decisions in business?
Yeah, you make a ton of business decisions in a small business, and they feel crucial, critical. Everybody on your team is looking to you for direction. I think that the first place to gain business wisdom is surrendering to the Lord, right? You do that first when you give your life to Christ, but it's a day in and day out surrender to him, because in his will, you're in the best position possible, right? We're sons and daughters of Christ, and that means we're heirs with Christ, and heirs are part of a will. There's 2 meanings to will. A will is someone's desires for you, and by surrendering to Christ, you're giving your will to him, and his will is what you're surrendering to. I think that that's instrumental. Proverbs 2:6 says, for wisdom comes from the Lord, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. To gain wisdom, I would do what Solomon does. Solomon just asked for wisdom straight out. I asked to be challenged and stretched, which is a much harder path. Yes. But I think that wisdom comes in 2 ways. He can ordain it and put it upon you immediately, but he can also do it over long periods of time. For me, in buying the business, that was a 16-year path in providing wisdom by surrendering to his will.
Yeah, amen. We had talked before this interview too about the practice of gleaning. We want to actually read the definition of gleaning from the book of Leviticus here as well. So Leviticus 23:22 says this: when you reap the harvest of your land Do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave them for the poor and for the foreigner residing among you. I am the Lord your God. So I know that this idea of gleaning has been important to you for business decisions as well as your own business life. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, gleaning has a couple of different aspects, but I'm going to use it from a wisdom aspect first. I think that being around and gaining the wisdom of others and sitting on the edges and the periphery, it was hugely instrumental for me. I did that throughout my life. As a child, sitting around our living room or kitchen table when my parents were talking about tent making and how to share the gospel, in banking, following around senior bankers and CEOs at networking events. At events like this, as a young person in business, I would often come up to the speaker, right? People come up to the speaker afterwards and ask questions. I would often go up to them. I didn't have any wise questions of my own, but I just sat there to listen to other people's questions and answers. And it was a great form of gleaning. Occasionally, the speaker would ask, "So what's your question?" And humbly, I'd say, "I don't actually have a question. I'm just gleaning." And I think that gleaning is a huge component to wisdom. I've learned so much from the people in this room that's been hugely valuable to me. One of the most valuable tools, I would say, as an entrepreneur is a tool I call Phone a Friend. The network and relationships that I've built through the Denver Institute for Faith and Work and other places, there's always an answer to the question that I have. Whether it's a really complex business question or a simple tactical question, I can pull out, my LinkedIn profile or Rolodex, and there's somebody to call and ask for advice. And so gleaning wisdom has been instrumental and huge.
Okay, good. And as we close up, tell us a little bit more about how this has played into the vision of the treatment technology, where you feel the Lord calling you to bring treatment tech in this next season.
Yeah, our vision for treatment technology is an ambitious one, but we want to provide generational opportunity for 100 employees through treatment technology. And that means impacting their social, their financial, their emotional, spiritual well-being, and we're working to measure all of those components. So we spend time with each of our drivers, my leadership team. We coordinate going on drives, on deliveries, making sure that we're fulfilling all aspects of their lives. Often blue-collar workers have been discarded. They're utilized for a task or a job and not seen as a person, and provided broader opportunity. Our goal in scaling and growing is really to provide opportunities for additional people and also provide upward mobility for those that are within our team. And so that's hugely motivating for us.
Great. What's one final takeaway you can give to us today of what it's meant to live out God's wisdom in business, particularly treatment tech?
I would say first and foremost is surrendering to the Lord's will. Treatment tech belongs to the Lord. It's very obvious to me in how he brought the business to the table, right? That's a huge blessing to look at one business and that be the business that you acquire and allow it to grow. And so every day I can look at treatment tech and say, "This is yours, Lord." When things are going well, you're blessing us. When things are challenging, you're teaching us. And in both circumstances, you're drawing us closer to you. And I'm open to both of those. I'm thankful for when he's blessing us. And when it's challenging, I can say, "Lord, what are you teaching me?"
Amen. Please help me thank Bob Larkin.
Thanks so much, Matt. And I hope you also enjoyed the conversation with Bob and Jeff Haanen. And if you're listening in still, what I would love to just point out is these stories are not really about the big, flashy, huge impact that someone's doing because their faith motivated it. It's really about the small things. It's about the daily, consistent work that is often unseen, that no one really notices. And that is what Matt and Bob are up to and why we love having them on. And also one of the cool things about being an entrepreneur through acquisition is really a chance to just see how that everyday work is an opportunity to love your neighbor, whether that's your customer or your client or your coworker or an investor, whoever that happens to be. So my challenge for you this week, whether you're an ETA or not, is to not wait for a big platform or the perfect time to start integrating your faith in your work, or that it needs to look a certain kind of way. Just start with the next thing on your to-do list, the next project, the next responsibility that you have, and think about how you can see that as an opportunity to serve God and others in your daily work. So it's really faithful work in the daily grind with God and for others. That's what is leading to change in companies, neighborhoods, and lives. And you can do that right now today.
We've got 2 follow-ups for you if this conversation sparked anything with you. One, you could share this with a friend who's either in the entrepreneurship space considering it. And then 2, we have a couple of opportunities here at Denver Institute for those who are in the Denver Front Range. The first for people who are owning, running, or building businesses as entrepreneurs. We have our Denver Redemptive Lab, which will be happening November 12th through 14th. You can get more information about that. It is a experience designed by Praxis out of New York City, which we run locally for Front Range leaders in the entrepreneurship or ETA space. And second is our 5280 Fellowship that Ross mentioned. 5280 Fellows is an early to mid-career experience that combines theology for our work, spiritual formation, and professional development exercises that help us to be more faithfully living with God through our workplace for the sake of the world. So you can learn about that at 5280fellows.com. And if you're listening from somewhere outside the Denver Front Range, since those are both live and local expressions, at 5280fellows.com, we have linked to a number of our friends leading fellowship experiences like this around the country. And on our Denver Redemptive Lab page, we've pointed to Praxis Labs in New York, where you can find another lab that's in your area. We just want to support the good work of our good friends in other places.
Brian Gray, it's great doing episodes with you. Thanks for taking time to join and lead us in good questions and where we can learn together. Appreciate it.
Good to be here. Thanks, Ross.
If you've enjoyed this episode of the Faith and Work podcast, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend. The Faith and Work podcast is produced by Denver Institute. We believe that when Christians work faithfully, the world will taste the hope and life that Jesus provides. To learn more or to make a financial contribution, visit denverinstitute.org.